Welcome to Trichotillomania Bootcamp. This is episode number 8, and today we're talking about the triggers for hair pulling. Stay tuned. Welcome back, guys. So today we're going to talk about something a bit different. We talked about the remission formula in previous episodes. We talked about the structure of the trick problem before that. Today we're going to talk about the triggers for hair pulling. A lot of what I'm talking about today relies heavily on my own experience. So I encourage you to take what I'm saying and apply it and see if it applies actually to your own experience, to your own pattern of pulling behavior. From my understanding, from what I see within my 30 years of experience with it, there are two families of hair pulling triggers. There are the physical triggers and the psychological triggers. So let's start our conversation with the physical triggers of hair pulling. For me, within the realm of physical triggers, all the triggers that have to do with our body, there are two sub types. One is the sensory triggers, and another one is heat regulation triggers. So within sensory triggers, there are several. First of all, sweat. The sweat leaves this sticky residue on the skin. So for me, that sensation is uncomfortable, and this would trigger episodes of hair pulling, or at least increased likelihood of those episodes. So sweat is number one. Number two is dry skin, because my own pattern of hair pulling was focused on my eyebrows and eyelashes. The dry skin around my eyes would increase the likelihood of pulling behavior. If your pattern is focused on your scalp hair, I'm sure it's going to be a different trigger for you. So look at your own pattern behavior, use your TLC journal to see what are the patterns of your own hair pulling and apply those. Another sensory trigger for me is the actual sensation of my eyebrows and eyelashes. So when I would play with my eyebrows or eyelashes and get this hair sensation, that as and of itself would be a trigger for pulling in the past. And finally, sensory trigger number 4 is sleep in my eyes. So if I would wake up in the morning, that could be potentially, with the sleep in my eyes, that would potentially be a trigger for pulling on my eyelashes, right? So those are sensory triggers. The second subtype of physical triggers are those heat regulation triggers. And there are several of those as well. First of all for me, it's caffeine. So caffeine creates heat in the body, right? And for me, sometimes, especially if I drink coffee later during the day, I feel flushed and my face feels flushed. And that sensation of overheating is a significant trigger for hair pulling for me. The second trigger from the heat regulation type is, again, sweat. When I exercise or when I get my body to get sweating and going, the overheating aspect of that was a trigger for hair pulling. And lastly, within the heat regulation triggers, the poor hydration is a big one. So if I would be slightly dehydrated, it would be more likely for me to pull my hair. So those are the family of physical triggers with the two subtypes of sensory triggers and heat regulation triggers. The second family is the psychological triggers. So the psychological triggers are the thoughts, emotions, and now internal resources. So our thoughts. From my experience, any pattern of negative thought, anything negative that you're thinking about yourself, about others, about the world, creates a negative state, and this increases the likelihood of pulling behavior. So thought pattern, thought habit is a first significant psychological trigger. The second one is our emotions. And of course, our thoughts and emotions are one unit. Whenever we think something, we also have a feeling about it if it's significant enough for us. So the pattern of any negative emotion would increase the likelihood of my pulling behavior. If I felt anxious, if I felt down for some reason, if I felt frustrated, any kind of negative emotion that is intense enough would be a trigger for my pulling behavior. And lastly, the third psychological trigger is the internal resources. So within internal resources umbrella, we have two components. We have the element of stress, and we have a trigger of fatigue. Basically, both stress and fatigue take away from your ability to cope with other things. It kind of like saps all your coping resources and all your inner ability to focus and divert energy to anything else. Stress is because this issue that you're stressed about kind of sucks all the energy into that and leaves very little to anything else. And fatigue is because you don't have a lot of energy left to begin with, right? So I would find myself when I would be stressed or when I would be tired in the evening, I would be much more likely to pull on my hair. So those are the physical and the psychological triggers for hair pulling. Now, the reason it's important is very simple. Next time, in next episodes, we'll talk about how to use those triggers to actually find remedies to support your path and supercharge your path toward full and sustained remission. So we'll talk more about it next time. Please, if you have questions, shoot me a brief message. If you would like to share your experience in the process of remission from hair pulling, please put it in the comments. I really want people to be able to see and read that. And I will see you guys very soon.